Arthur the King is a bit cliche, but it's also surprisingly good, and I didn't expect much going into this thing, but this film definitely exceeded my expectations. It was a fun watch, even though it has its problems, so let's talk about this thing. As always, this video will have spoilers, even though this movie is based off a true story, and you could technically find the spoilers pretty easy, but if you don't want spoilers, you can head over to my shorts, TikTok, or Instagram and check out my one-take movie review on this movie. But without further ado, let's talk about Arthur the King. So as I said before, this movie follows the true story of Michael Lenord, who was an adventure racer, and being played by Mark Wahlberg in this film, he goes on one last race, and on the way he meets a dog named Arthur who helps him along the way. Starting things off with the good, I obviously have Mark Wahlberg, and it's safe to say Mark Wahlberg did Mark Wahlberg things in this movie. He was entertaining and fun to watch as always, and honestly he was the main reason I went to go see this movie, because I tend to like movies that Mark Wahlberg is in, unless they're the Transformers movies. And to be honest, it kind of felt like he was the only actor that was truly invested in this movie. I mean, I thought he did a great job with the progression of his character. In the beginning, he was this very, very selfish man who only cared about himself and winning this race. And to be honest, that kind of made me resent him in the very beginning of this film. But as this movie went on, especially when he met the dog Arthur, you saw him start to change, and that, I guess, kind of leads me into my next point about this movie. So next up for the good is obviously the relationship between Michael and Arthur, and this is clearly the heart of the movie. It's the thing that holds this whole thing together. Now, the emotional moments between the humans in this movie didn't work so well, but I will get to that in a second. But the emotional moments between Michael and Arthur worked really well, and they really try to pull on your heartstrings right there at the end of the movie, with Arthur getting sick and potentially maybe dying. But the one thing that made this relationship work, in my opinion, is not only did it help with Michael's character development throughout the movie, but these two also kind of needed each other as well. I mean, Michael obviously needed Arthur to help him get through the race, and then we turn around in the end of the movie and Arthur needs Michael to help him get healthy from the infection he had. And finally, for the good, I have the race. Now, the relationship between Michael and Arthur was the heart of this movie, but the race is what I think carried this movie. It was definitely my favorite part of the movie. It had plenty of fun and heartwarming moments as well to go along with it, and this race pretty much took up the majority of this movie, and it kind of marked where I started enjoying this film, because the beginning of this movie was pretty rough, but I will get to that in just a second. But yes, in terms of fun and kind of getting an adrenaline rush of seeing them go through all these different terrains and conquer all these different challenges, the race was that in this movie, and that is why it is my favorite part in this film. Moving on to the so-so, and the first thing I have here is the side characters. Now, the side characters in this movie were very underdeveloped, and you could kind of tell that by the performances that the actors gave. Now, the performances weren't bad by any means, but at some points in this film, it did feel like they were kind of just there for the paycheck. And I guess it's not all their fault. I mean, the script really didn't help them in this area either. They tried to give them each a little bit of depth, but they never really went into it, so it just made their characters feel very surface level compared to Mark Wahlberg's character throughout the movie. And all in all, this isn't that big of a deal, but I just felt like the side characters really served no purpose in this movie, and I know it's based off a true story, but this movie honestly could have been just as good without them, in my opinion. And when we did get some of those emotional character moments between all of our human characters, they just kind of fell flat for me, and that brings me right into my next point, which is the emotional moments between the humans weren't that great, as I said before. The emotional moments between the humans in this movie just kind of felt forced, in my opinion. And on top of that, when we did get these moments, they really didn't impact the story at all. We would have characters either maybe get into an argument or have a deep moment between each other, and then this movie would just kind of move on and forget about it, and that just kind of made me feel like that happened for no reason at all. I just wish they went a little deeper into the side characters, because that would have made the emotional moments hit a little bit harder than they did, and plus, when they finally finished the race, that would have made that part of the movie a little bit more rewarding, because you're invested in everyone instead of just Mark Wahlberg and the dog. And finally, getting into the bad, and the first thing I have here is the dialogue, and sadly, in my opinion, the dialogue was not the best in this movie. Now, was it as bad as Madam Web's dialogue? Absolutely not. That is an accomplishment that I don't think any movie will surpass in the near or distant future. Now, the dialogue in this movie got better as it went on, but I have it here in the bad because it was pretty cliche and some of the lines in this movie were just really poorly timed. For instance, right before the race when Nathalie, Emmanuel's character, I believe her name was Olivia, dropped that her dad was dying of cancer, it really pulled me out of the movie because it kind of came out of nowhere and was just a really poorly timed line. I mean, we are about to get into probably the most exciting part of the movie, which is the race, and then out of nowhere, unprovoked, you hear, "My dad is dying of cancer," and it just really kind of stops the whole scene, stops all the momentum going up into the race, and just stops the movie in general, in my opinion. And yes, as I said before, the dialogue did get progressively better throughout this movie, but it was just lines and moments like that where I was just like, man, that line could have went somewhere else in the movie and worked a little bit better. And the last thing I have for the bad is the beginning, and it is safe to say that the beginning of this film definitely got off to a bumpy start. It was one of those things where I was sitting there during the first 20 to 25 minutes of this movie thinking, oh man, what the heck did I just get myself into? But once we got to the race, this movie only got better from there on out, in my opinion. And in the beginning, they kind of just jumped around a lot, and it was at this point in the movie where the dialogue was definitely at its worst. It kind of just felt like they wanted to get through the beginning as quickly as they possibly could and get to the race because they knew that the race was the best part of the movie. So yes, this is one of those movies, if you can get through that first 20 to 25 minutes, it's gonna be smooth sailing from there. All in all, I enjoyed this movie more than I thought I would. It definitely has its drawbacks, but at the end of the day, the relationship between Mark Wahlberg and Arthur the dog is enough to pull you in and really pull on your emotions, making this a solid, heartwarming underdog story. Those are my thoughts on Arthur the King. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.